In 2022, a gentleman named Victor Vescovo, one of the greatest explorers of our time, slowly piloted his submarine, the DSV Limiting Factor, toward a shipwreck in the Philippine Trench. That shipwreck, the USS Johnston, is the greatest shipwreck of all time. When Vescovo piloted his submarine towards the Johnston, however, he was only completing a journey that had begun many years ago, when Commander Ernest Evans of the U.S. Navy first took command of it. Evans, who was one-quarter Native American, a Cherokee, quickly turned the ship into one of the finest vessels in all of the Tin Can Navy, or destroyer fleet. At this time, the forces to which the Johnston would belong were commanded by two officers. William F. Halsey was known for his aggressiveness, while Raymond A. Spruance was known for his calm and clear-headed thinking. Luckily, it was Spruance who had led U.S. naval forces to the great victories of World War II. It was he who had led U.S. naval forces at Midway, where the turning point of the war began, and it was he who had destroyed Japanese air forces at the Philippine Sea, a victory from which Japanese forces would never recover. Unluckily, however, it was Halsey who would command U.S. naval forces at the largest battle in American history. This battle, known as the Battle of Leyte Gulf, would take place off a small Philippine island while U.S. forces invaded there. The pinpoint of that battle would be known for all time as the Battle off Samar. When Halsey reached Leyte Gulf, he would soon detect the Japanese fleet under Admiral Takeo Kurita. Kurita would begin to flee from Leyte Gulf, and thinking that his enemy could be chased down, Halsey would follow. However, most of Kurita's force, under Kurita, would circle back to Leyte Gulf to destroy the troops landing there, while a small decoy force under Admiral Ozawa would continue to pull Halsey further and further away from the men who needed his help. The only thing standing in the way of Kurita, however, would be a small force known as Taffy 3. Among Taffy 3 would be several flat tops, among them Kalinan Bay, St. Lo, Gambier Bay, and others. Also, there would be 3 destroyers, Heerman, Hoel, and Johnston, and 1 destroyer escort, the USS Samuel B. Roberts. Much of the success of the battle of this small force against the might of the Japanese Navy would be down to Commander Evans, who would charge his ship, the USS Johnston, at the enemy, firing away at giant cruisers, battleships, and many destroyers. Despite the difference in the size of the forces, the Americans would win because Evans had led the small destroyers and destroyer escort up against the Japanese ships, had continued to fire until he had sunk one of them, and had continued to fight even after his ship was dead in the water. As a result, his ship would be sunk, and he, along with many of his men, would go down with her. The flat tops, too, would take heavy losses, with both the USS Gambier Bay and the USS St. Lo sinking, some of the last flat tops to ever sink in American combat. Despite this, however, the Japanese would successfully be fooled into thinking they had met with a much larger force and would retreat, never to challenge the U.S. Navy again. Commander Evans would receive a posthumous Medal of Honor, and for many years, nothing more would be heard of the Johnston and many of her crew. In 2019, however, a vessel, the RV Petrel, visited the approximate wreck site of the Johnston, led by a man named Bob Ballard. Ballard, the discoverer of the RMS Titanic, is quite likely the most famous and legendary underwater archaeologist alive. The Petrel was able to use ROV, or remote operated vehicle technology, to find the Johnston and to measure how deep she was. From then until 2022, she would be known as the deepest shipwreck in the world. A year before, Vescovo had finished construction of his submarine, Limiting Factor, and begun to use it to venture to the 5 deepest points in all the Earth's oceans. This proved that it was unquestionably the most capable submarine ever. After he was done with that, looking about for new things to do, he visited both the wreck of the RMS Titanic and the wreck of the Johnston. This audacious dive was a fitting tribute to the bravery and courage of a Cherokee warrior and the men he led.